Now I am honored to invite to the stage Dr. Abdullatif al-Zayani, who is the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Please.
Sheikh Abdullah, thank you for your remarks. It's hard to come after you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Excellency, Dr. Abdul Aziz bin Saqr, the Chairman, Your Excellency Sheikh Abdullah, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I must thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the invitation to speak at this prestigious gathering, to which I have returned almost every year since 2011. Of course, being a returning speaker means attempting each year to have something fresh and insightful to say. So, as I was carrying out my annual pre-speech struggle for words, I was struck by a realization. As ever, the GRC has invited such a wide range of participants that I am addressing, an audience whose combined knowledge of global and regional affairs far exceeds me and my own. And so, I thought that instead of trying to deliver answers, I should humbly ask questions in order to stimulate discussion and to learn from the combined expertise and experience gathered here today. Accordingly, I have crafted the title of my talk as a question. When the Middle East dust settles, what then? In other words, when the dust settles from the interplay between external and internal layers of influence on the region, assuming that one day it will, what would we like to see emerge? Will we be ready for it? For external and some external powers, Europe, for example, stir little dust. Others, such as China, are growing in influence, but able to enjoy evolving and warming relations with most countries, while yet others, such as Russia, stir little dust overtly, but are seen by some as working behind the scenes to cause the curtains to twitch uncomfortably. It is the United States, though, which has the greatest impact on the region. Given our deep and long-standing political, economic, social, and security ties, and the greatest potential both to raise dust, storms, and to quell them, such as the weight of its influence. Ultimately, however, all the major external players seek to influence the region in furtherance of their perceived national interests, and so the dust rises. But today, outside powers recognize that in furthering their interests, lasting settlements are infinitely more desirable than short-term adventures. So these are the outside influences, and I want now to ask my first question. Is there any way for us to influence outside powers so that their interests are aligned for the good of the region? And now we move nearer the core. to the nations of the Middle East, including our own Gulf states. We all have internal and external supporters and detractors, and we all have our allies and opponents. We have individual defense and foreign policies, and in some cases, we differ marginally from each other despite being linked through an alliance. Some support organizations which others oppose. Some have issues with internal violence, while others feel or are being threatened externally. So the overall regional picture is complex, with interlinked relationships, subtle nuances, apparent contradictions, and constantly evolving dynamics. But for the most part, the issues and challenges are clear. Palestine, Iran, Syria, Yemen, Libya, Iraq, Daesh and other terrorist groups, hostile cyber activities, global threats of religious-led extremism and radicalization, and so on. Equally clear are the various initiatives at all levels, most totally independent of each other, to try to solve or at least minimize the different challenges. But if we are to influence outside powers to align their interests with those of the region, surely we need a coherent, joined-up, focused response to the issues we face. Wouldn't it be better to prioritize the challenges and focus greatest effort where it can have most effect? This leads me to my second question. In order of priority, which of the challenges in the Middle East, if resolved, would be most likely to lead to a long-term regional reduction in violence and tension? Here, there are many opinions, but little consensus. Of the many possibilities for priority one issues, I personally believe that our two main challenges are Palestine and Iran, and that the links between them account for much of the current tensions. Indeed, in my view, the failure to reach a just solution to the Palestinian issue feeds the activities of Iran and other actors in spreading terrorism, extremism, and radicalization in the region and beyond. So it is on these two issues that we should coordinate our energy and diplomacy towards a solution. But what if there was an approach which, if treated as a priority, could help address all these issues? Ladies and gentlemen, in the 8 years that I have been in this role, I have realized that the overwhelming focus of academics and thinkers is on the short and medium term, for the very good reason that the long term cannot be properly gauged until today's complexities are solved. But on the other hand, would today's challenges be easier to resolve if there were a long-term vision towards which we could work? Can the long term be prevailed upon to influence the shorter term? Is it easier to settle the Middle East dust when we have decided upon the what then? I put it to you again that momentum in addressing individual challenges is best maintained if there is a long-term vision towards which each plan is interlocked. The vision I am talking about is ambitious, yet simple. the creation of a sustainable, secure, and prosperous Middle East. Now for my next question. How is a sustainable, secure, and prosperous Middle East best achieved? Those who were here last year will recall that I introduced for the first time the word interdependence and put forward some arguments to back my theme of creating a vision of interdependence. I make no apologies for repeating some of those arguments today, because I am convinced that it is through interdependence that interests can be harmonized, compromises reached, collaboration achieved, and benefits made available for major powers and regional nations alike. Above all, by attempting to answer the long-term what then, we might see answers to the short-term what now. So just as the nations of Europe have come to realize over the past 75 years the value of aligning their national interests more closely for national and regional benefit, might we persuade some states in the MENA region of the value of cooperation over the pursuit of a narrow national interest? Ladies and gentlemen, the key issue for the Middle East is how to encourage movement towards interdependence without the terrible conflicts which drove Europe to the same realization. These are themes which I covered in more detail last year, and I am sure that the Gulf Research Center would be happy to point you towards the transcript should you be interested in revisiting those remarks. And while I won't repeat them in detail, I can summarize by saying that this momentous challenge requires imagination, flexibility, political will, and careful calibration. Its undoubted financial cost has to be balanced against the long-term dividends and the trillions wasted on conflict and misery. Last year, I set out a possible roadmap to the goal, with like-minded nations initially articulating a long-term vision and conceptual plan, then reaching out to others, like ripples spreading in a pond, to join a loose association whose long-term aim is peace and prosperity through interdependence. I reasoned that doubters and adversaries could be drawn in through a goal that was so attractive that not to be part of it would be to demonstrably lose out. Today, I want to touch briefly on the financial aspect, because without adequate financial incentives and support, the vision of interdependence is non-starter. That is why I have been encouraged by the recent moves. And I think the workshop alluded by His Excellency Sheikh Abdullah too, that was conducted in Bahrain, is one of those moves to conceptualize regional financial interdependence, to get more parties to recognize the economic benefits of cooperation over confrontation, and to begin to engage with outside powers on how such interdependence can be encouraged. From here, could we perceive the kernel of a kind of Middle Eastern Marshall Plan, nurturing substantial investment from both the region and beyond to develop and expand both the physical infrastructure and the networks of cooperation and trade that form the bedrock of interdependence? Although such steps can only come to fruition in the context of a comprehensive political settlement along the lines of the widely accepted Arab Peace Initiative, and although economic interdependence cannot be built in a vacuum, requiring at the very least that political issues are resolved in a just and sustainable manner. Maybe, just maybe, this vision of prosperity through interdependence can unlock momentum towards resolving regional political issues. If it can, and I believe it can, then surely it is incumbent on the international community, on all outside powers, to support and advocate both the benefits of such a vision and the just political settlements it will entail. Mr. Chairman, as we look to the future and the long term, I think we can perceive an answer to one of the questions I posed earlier. How do we align the interests of outside powers for the good of the region? And perhaps the answer to my main question, when the dust settles, what then? Well, here is a vision of what comes next. A vision of a peaceful, stable, prosperous, and interdependent Middle East, massively expanding its trade and cooperation both within the region and across the globe to spread prosperity and development. And I believe that the interests of all the major outside powers are aligned in realizing this vision. For regional stability contributes to global stability, just as regional prosperity fuels global growth. And once this alignment of interest is fully recognized, those outside powers can help through investing in a new, optimistic era and through supporting from our small beginnings the institutions, the links, and the trust that will be required. They can do so, too, through being vocal advocates of the benefits that will follow, and by encouraging all concerned to move seriously and in good faith towards this goal, so that the only losers will be those who choose not to participate. But I would ask that you take on board my main point, that we must move away from the temptation of thinking small, of thinking only of the present. I say this, whether you are a world power, a regional neighbor, or a nation that is intimately involved, or indeed the one of think tanks and forums, which shape the global intellectual landscape. Because the more we can think beyond the dust of today and start planning for a brighter future, the more we will give hope to the region's citizens, and the more likely it is to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have outlined one possible vision to answer the question, what then? A vision which I hope is compelling, or at least worthy of further debate and consideration. But perhaps I might close on another question. Having considered the future I have outlined, if not this, then what? Thank you.